Um, so again, welcome everybody. We're going to be talking today about the role of end-to-end testing and improving the accessibility quality of websites and web applications. So again, I'm Andrew, one of the co-founders of Assistiv Labs. I'm going to turn it over to Weston and Nick.
Sounds good. Thanks y'all so much for joining. Can hop in here. We have a few slides and then hopefully spend a bunch of time with examples
First slide. Accessibility First End-to-End Testing. Assistiv Labs. May 7th, 2025.
and demos. So agenda for today, we're going to do just a brief extra kind of intros and context about the accessibility space as we see it. And we'll talk about end-to-end testing that's not accessibility specific and what we mean by that. And then get into accessibility first end-to-end testing, followed by a demo, and we'll try to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Um, if you have questions along the way, hopefully you do, please feel free to ask in the Zoom chat. Andrew will help field those. We'll try to answer async and save some for the end to talk about. So questions quite welcome. Bit about us, Andrew introduced himself. We also have Nick here, one of the software engineers on our team. Um, and I'm Weston, other co-founder. Um, so a bit about Assistiv Labs. We are a accessibility company kind of through and through. We really care about trying to raise accessibility quality, raise the bar on that through both tooling, but also processes. And we're big believers that human judgment is a really critical part of this. So we're not really like a AI solves everything type positioning. Um, Although we definitely see use cases for it. And Assistive Labs has been around for a couple of years now. I think we were the first assistive technology cloud, the ability to put like screen readers and other test environments up in the cloud. Came in about 2020, and we've been working on this thing called accessibility focused or first end-to-end testing that is involving that assistive technology cloud. And we also do some professional services enabled by that platform.
Live testing slide screenshots of Assistiv Labs dashboard and NVDA running in an Assistiv Labs test session virtual machine. Icons for NVDA, JAWS, and other assistive technologies listed at the bottom.
And very briefly, we have two products in the market. Live testing is what you see if you go to our website right now. The idea is that you can just load up in your browser NVDA or JAWS or Narrator or Windows High Contrast mode without needing to be on a PC or have that device ready. Try to make that super simple.
Accessibility end-to-end tech slide robot connected to NVDA, Chrome, Axe DevTools icon, icon, and keyboard icon.
We'll be talking about this today. We have forgive the algorithm. So A11Y, for those who aren't familiar, is a numerism for accessibility. And then E2E is a shortening for end-to-end. But we have a technology that involves assistive technologies. This is the screen reader NVDA's icon, browsers, scanners like Axe, machine vision, all that cool stuff, and involves automating it. We also offer what we call evergreen audits. And the idea here is we do WCAG audits. They're powered by this technology and platform, complemented by human judgment in our services, integrated inside CI/CD. We're excited about that. That's all I'll say on it for now. So general context, the way we look at the space that we operate in of digital accessibility. A lot of companies are prioritizing accessibility. There are a number of different drivers from that, from uh, grassroots stuff in terms of people wanting to bring up accessible design, kind of from the bottom up, applying to brand values, regulations, all good stuff that leads to prioritizing accessibility. And when companies do prioritize it, we usually see it turn into a really sustained multi-year effort. Accessibility is a job that's never done. So companies are thinking about their accessibility strategy and their maturity over time and kind of how to grow that. And we see a number of activities done around that internally. Folks will focus on internal education. That's really common of helping people at the company understand that accessibility is a priority, trying to ramp up folks on the basics and more advanced stuff in all disciplines, design, PM, engineering, QA. Um, Manual audits has always been a large part of it, whether internal and external, but working with experts in accessibility to kind of get an idea of a website or a product or an app's quality at any state and time. What are the issues in it? We're big fans of user research. So testing your website, getting feedback from disabled users in the disabled community, a lot of that going on. Launch checklists is a really shorthand way of talking about process, but the idea of when you are developing features, when you're doing work, accessibility is kind of part of your definition of done. It's built into specs. It's considered at multiple parts in the process. Shift left is a big part of this movement. And then the last piece here is, I'm sure there's much more than this, but here's some of the big ones, is ACTs and scanners, this idea of applying accessibility-specific automation to your accessibility strategy. So we're going to focus in on that for this talk. I'll hand it off to you, Nick.
So yeah, companies are drawn to automation tools like X or scanners for a variety of different reasons. A big one is that they're really fast and scalable. So you can scan hundreds of different pages on your website or application in, a few seconds or minutes, which if you were to try to manually go through all of those pages every time you scanned, it would take a lot longer. You can also monitor your state of accessibility with some kind of historical record, basically getting some metrics and data as you're changing your website. You can see how your ACT scans number of issues and things are changing over time. And you're able to shift a little bit left by stopping bugs before they're shipped. If you have your ACT scans or any kind of automation tools in your CI/CD pipeline, you can catch them before they're shipped to production and users are interacting with them. And you're able to kind of protect what's accessible by having these automatic tools preventing you from regressing or introducing new bugs. And they're a lot cheaper usually than if you were to manually audit as much. So a big common use case for automation is static code analysis. This is also known as scanners. And you've probably heard of these ones like AXCore, Wave, Microsoft Accessibility Insights, which is really kind of just Axe under the hood, Google Lighthouse, which is also really just Axe under the hood with some different rules turned on and off. And these are really great because they can find a lot of basic issues that you need to address. Say you have an image on your website that's missing alternative text. This is going to scan your website, look at every image and make sure that it has proper alternative text and make sure that you have accessible names on interactive elements. That's really great. It tests on the rendered web page. So this is the DOM or the accessibility tree that you see. So when you go to a website, it's rendering it, and then the scanner is scanning based on that. An issue is that they're a little bit context blind, so that they are just going to be the same kind of scan running on every single part in your website. And maybe there are areas in your website you want to focus in on certain things a bit more. It's not going to know about that. It's just going to give you an output based on what it generated from the scan. And it's unable to test interactions. So if you have anything that's involved based on like clicking, you have a bug that's introduced from activating an element or moving something around, Axe isn't going to catch that. Axe is just getting a static scan of the page at a moment in time. Moving forward from that is flow analysis, which is kind of like scanners plus plus. You get a bit more than that static moment in time because you're scanning at a bunch of different moments in time. So say you scan the home page and then you scan again right after you open a dialog or you click a button that pops open a dropdown. Now you're getting more data. You're getting data for what it looks like in these two different states. So flow analysis is basically you're taking a flow of like the user is filling out this form and opening these dialogues, and you're scanning at a bunch of different points in time to get some more just kind of data and scans in there. So it's still context blind a little bit because it's the same general concept as a regular static code analysis, Axe core scan or something, but you're just getting a lot more data put into it and drawn out of it. And a benefit here, though, is that it can find some bugs based on interactions. So say that you open up a dropdown, and now that dropdown has some inaccessible, like it's missing an accessible name or something in one of the items. That's going to be caught now when it wouldn't have been caught before. And then what about end-to-end testing? So that's something that is another type of automation, but you don't really hear about it as much in the accessibility space. What can that do in terms of just generally for when you're writing tests and you're trying to automate your development process? So you've probably heard about end-to-end testing in some of these common examples like Selenium, Cypress, Playwright, and Puppeteer. These are all kind of drivers that will simulate a user going through actions on a website. And yeah, these are all pretty powerful tools for end-to-end testing. So end-to-end testing basically mimics a real user interacting with the website. So it'll load up some website, it'll click on buttons to activate things, it'll do what you tell it to do. So if you're trying to write an end-to-end test that's checking that a user is able to sign up for a free trial, it's going to go to your website. You're going to make sure that you can click the start free trial button. You're going to make sure that you can fill out your email and get an email and do all that. And it's going to pass if you can do all of those steps from start to end. So that's really good for stopping regressions because it's going to fail if you introduce something that means that that flow can no longer be accomplished. Say you introduce a bug that means this button that you click to start free trial, it doesn't open the free trial modal anymore. That's going to be caught now because end-to-end testing is going to say, oh, I can't complete this flow. I can't complete this test. So that's an issue. So that's really useful. Axe can find regressions too. Like a scanner can find regressions. But this can find some like interactive regressions that are really useful and not able to really be caught from scanners before. And it's primarily used for regressions because you're not going to write an end-to-end test when you're creating like a new feature. Maybe if you're doing like test-driven development, you're going to try to have a test done before like and ship that along with the new feature. But if you have a new feature and you want to like check that that's accessible, it's not going to be really through end-to-end testing as much or check that it's working. You're going to do some just manual or some kind of analysis on the feature as you're creating it. So end-to-end testing is more about the regressions and keeping things from breaking in the future. And it falls into the category of automated, not automatic testing. So talking a bit more about that, automatic testing, these are tools that work by themselves out of the box. So scanner, a linter, something like Axe. So this is built-in self-acting behavior. So you can just run it immediately and you don't have to do any additional work really. So you can say, go to your homepage and just press the scan button and you'll get a bunch of data. You'll get results about how accessible your page is or something. So an example of that is an automatic Axe scan found XYZ, these number of issues on the homepage. Automated on the counter end of that is a tool that's set up to do a specific task when it's triggered. So it's been configured by someone to validate specific criteria. So if you have an automated test that's going through a checklist of things, you want to make sure that this is here. You want to make sure that you can do this. You want to make sure that when you go to this point, this button has this state. So an example of that would be an automated run from CI/CD revealed that the checkout flow is broken. So this is a really crucial distinction in understanding kind of the difference between the different types of automation tools. And we have a bit of a demo right here to showcase that.
Yeah, I'll show that in kind of familiar terms with accessibility. So if I use our homepage as an example, and we focus on like the automatic piece of it, which these aren't like official industry terms, we just find it useful in talking about automation in terms of accessibility, because I think so many of us have just been accustomed to automation meaning one thing, which is, oh, it's something like Axe. Like I can install a Chrome extension, I can click one button. Like all I had to do really was give it a web page and it did some stuff and figured out if I have any issues on this web page. Yay. None. But difference or the distinction we're trying to make with automated is when you are putting more work into having the computer do that work for you. So if on this page I wanted to make sure our navigation worked, I want to make sure I can like open a drop down and actually reach, a landing page. Very simple scenario. You can imagine more complex ones with signing in, checking out. But just to show you an example of like how you would go about doing that, I'll show it with a tool called Playwright, which was one of the ones we showed at the start. And there's some bootstrapping stuff of working with these, but they are generally in code. There are some no code solutions you can have, but it's the same idea, like whether you're writing code or whether you're using kind of a form to create it. Um, you would start by um, writing down what you need to happen. So with Playwright, you have this magical test keyword. And then you start declaring like, oh, I want to do a test of uh, global navigation. And then you start specifying what you want to do inside that test. And this is funky JavaScript syntax for anyone not familiar, but I'm just trying to go through the high level of it. So you would start writing down what you did in manually. So the first thing you need to do is probably load the page. So Playwright has methods for that. I want to go to assistivlabs.com. I want to click this drop down here, and you need to tell the test somehow like what is that thing. And it supports a variety of methods. The traditional historical way to do this is just like, oh, grab a CSS selector to that thing. So you could say await page dot. You can pass it some CSS. So click that thing. And then when this drop down's open, we also need to click the next thing inside it. So you can go ahead and grab that selector as well. And there's recorder tools to make this a little easier, but I'm just spelling out the details. Oops, forgot the crucial part of it. So you're clicking that thing. Yes, and I got the click over there. And then you can assert on a end result. So you might say like, well, I expect page dot URL. What is it? You have, yes. Let's see, when we go here, URL should be something like end-to-end accessibility testing. So once you have that test written, that was all manual, nothing automatic about it. But then you can automatically run all those steps in a repeatable fashion. So I could say example one, and this is going to be really fast. Load up the web page, and it passes. That was a little too fast to see what was going on. I think we can use just slow that down a little bit so we can watch what's going on. The page loads. You can't see the mouse that was emulated, but it did click and expand the drop down, and it clicked again. It got to that final page, and then it said, okay, we're done. So this is a great example of a traditional end-to-end test, how they've worked for the past 20 years or more. And sort of that automated fashion of it. I manually wrote it, but now I can run this as many times as I need to perform the same steps.
Yeah, and that is the benefit of that Weston just talked about is really incredible that you can repeat that flow that you've just written now. And it took like 3 seconds there, but that was running in head. It could run, I think, even faster sometimes. You can put that in your CI/CD checks, and then every time you make a change, you can see, oh, am I able to still do those things that I was expecting to be able to do before? Which helps you detect an issue before it's shipped. It helps you get this, feedback loop so devs can see if they have broken something maybe and, upload changes until the checks are all green. So it makes a really easy way for catching very specific bugs that are context, like the context for your page is baked into them, into the tests.
So that's a definition of end-to-end testing of what it means in a traditional sense. If your team or company is using any of these tools, that's probably roughly how they're using them. But there have been some strides to try to apply accessibility concerns into the end-to-end testing space, which is awesome. But to start out as a baseline, just to appreciate, in those tests, like these click methods are all about emulated mouse behavior. Um, Foundationally, all these tools were written around the idea of we're emulating a user with a mouse. On a desktop website, and then testing can do mobile as well as they emulate touch. But there's some ableism baked into that. That's been in the industry for a long time. That was the primary goal of that was the primary persona that the creators of end-to-end tests frameworks had in mind was, okay, somebody with a mouse who can see. So that's important to appreciate as kind of the perspective it's coming from. Not all end-to-end testing frameworks can accurately interact with the keyboard at all. Some can, but this supports super rudimentary. The things that you would kind of need to do to interact with the keyboard are hard to write out. And these things over here, they're called locators or selectors. That's a really core problem in end-to-end testing. How do you write down what the thing to go click on is? And for the longest time, accessibility wasn't really any factor inside that at all. There was basically two checks that end-to-end testing frameworks would do. They would make sure, okay, is a thing on the page that matches this visible? And is it able to be clicked? Does it make sure it doesn't have like a dialogue over it or something? If both those things are true, like good to go, keep going. And of course, that doesn't account for a huge amount of accessibility things. You don't know if it can be keyboarded to. You don't know if it can be interacted with a screen reader. You don't know if it has an accessible name or role. So if you try to map a mental model of coverage out of this, and we'll reuse this Venn diagram several times throughout the
large circle titled manual human testing with very small circle titled traditional E2E that is completely inside the manual human testing circle.
talk. If you pretend that a human, a skilled human, could potentially find any accessibility issue present on a website, they can find it on the initial page state, on any interaction, like they could find anything in theory. Traditional end-to-end testing, it can do a very small fraction of those things. There's aspects of WCAG that talk about pointer gestures. And it's like, yeah, you get coverage of some of those things, but a really tiny drop in the bucket. And by the way, these Venn diagrams are not to scale. We didn't calculate out numbers. This is just to kind of put things relative to each other. But luckily, there's been some advancements in the field. One that is semi-recent, like past 5 years, is this idea that instead of locating elements by the CSS selector or something else, we're actually going to try to use their accessibility information. So there's these utilities, like get by role is the idea that you can say, hey, I want a button with the accessible name of use cases, and go find that on a page for me. And that adds on to the traditional checks of just visible and clickable, and also makes sure that like, yeah, this needs to be a button in the accessibility tree, which is great. And that does increase coverage a little bit.
Slightly larger circle titled traditional E2E plus get by role, completely surrounding the circle titled traditional E2E, both inside the large circle titled manual human testing.
The test will fail if there is no longer a role of button. If this switches to link or loses its role altogether, the test would fail. But it's really tightly scoped inside, like just the things that you're clicking on. And then the second advancement Nick talked about a bit before that fits into the scanners plus plus category is the idea that it's super easy to take a large amount of existing end-to-end tests written in Selenium or Cypress or Playwright and do an integration with an accessibility scanner like Axe or Evinced or Wave. And they make this really simple. It's like one line of code to put it in. And basically the integration will run the scan on every page when it loads, and then it also will try to run after interaction. So just try to get a whole bunch of data into these scanners. And there's a lot of complexity with that, hard to pull off sometimes, but overall it's a good thing. Like
New larger circle titled traditional E2E plus get by role, plus a 11Y scanner integration completely surrounding the other two circles titled Traditional E2E plus Get by Role, and Traditional E2E, all inside the large circle titled Manual Human Testing.
Because these scanners can check a whole bunch of kind of low-hanging fruit, you're getting a whole bunch more coverage. The more data you feed it, kind of the better, as long as you can handle and dedupe that data. Um, so we think this is pretty representative of the end-to-end testing uh, technology available today, at least in the mainstream. There's some other efforts, but we think these are the main two things you'll probably see out there. But we asked ourselves, how much further can it go? What would it look like to really apply an accessibility lens to end-to-end testing? So we came up with this idea of accessibility first end-to-end testing. Or I don't know if we came up with it. A lot of people have thought about this problem, but the way we're defining it is take this practice of writing test it in automation, where you're writing it for a specific website, a specific product. You're trying to do it from the end user's perspective, but consider accessibility from the ground up, from everything you're building. It needs to be able to handle keyboarding, screen readers, WCAG validations, all that good stuff. Like, what would that look like? We realize kind of the raw materials that you need in a framework like that are different from traditional end-to-end testing, which is pretty much just like, oh, we need access to the browser and we need a mouse that we can emulate. You need access to the browser still, but you also want really good control of the keyboard. You do still want scanners inside there. They're wonderful and they are very broad. You probably want access to screen readers to check compatibility inside that. You want access to machine vision tools because there's a lot of aspects of accessibility that are visual based. Like, did something get bigger? Does it have the right amount of contrast? Is it visible or invisible? And then there's this whole kind of toolbox of things that you need to work with to do accessibility validations. So I'll hop into a demo of what we've been working on in this space and kind of our take on how you might work with that. So coming back to this example of the homepage, if I were to take that same sort of scenario of like, well, I want to make sure that our drop down's working, really small, but nicely self-contained to fit it in the space of an hour demo. If I were to manually accessibility audit this, my first step, honestly, would probably be opening the page and running Axe on it and just seeing if that detects anything. After I'd done that, I'd start probably using keyboard a little bit and interacting with the page, making sure I can use tab to get to this drop down, making sure I can open it with the keyboard and that focus is managed correctly. I'd also start probably opening the developer tools, getting curious of like, well, okay, what is this? All right, that's interesting. We put in a banner landmark. That's important for multiple aspects of accessibility. We also have a navigation landmark inside there. That's helpful. And I'd be looking at contrast. I'd be looking at whether focus is visible here. And I'd probably come back and do some validation with a screen reader. So I'd pull up in Assistiv Labs, you can pull up NVDA since I'm on a Mac here. But if I go through that kind of same flow with NVDA up, I'll start paying attention to what its announcements are and what that experience is like.
AssistivLabs.com selected. Assistiv Labs document.
So that's interesting. Assistiv Labs document, that's my announcement of page title. I think about that in terms of when is the web page ready for interaction. Also, page title is accurate and good to have for the home page. And then I'll start
Banner landmark. Skip to content link.
performing the same interactions. So that's good. NVDA announced that we're inside the banner landmark. Skip link is great that's present.
Navigation landmark. Assistiv Labs link visited current page.
It's good that we entered the navigation landmark. Notice it said current page for that link. So we're using, I think that's area current property to help cue people in as to where they are on the website navigation.
List. Use cases button collapsed.
So there's semantics there. It's saying, okay, you've entered a list. This is a button. If there's state, the button's currently collapsed.
Space. Expanded.
You're informed of its state change. It's expanded.
List. End-to-end accessibility testing link. End-to-end accessibility testing. Assistiv Labs. End-to-end accessibility testing. Assistiv Labs document.
And for better or worse, we're a single page app, so that wasn't a normal page transition. So focus was managed. It went to the H1 on the page, so you'd have a notification that the new page is ready, what page you're on. And I'd probably run Axe again on this page, but those are just some of the checks I would do. So how would I go about doing that in an end-to-end testing fashion? So let's create a second example here. Or one up. So instead of working with Playwright, we're working with a test framework that we've developed, but you work with it in a very similar way. You're declaring what a test is, and then instead of getting a browser page, you're getting access to this assistive page, which is like a browser, but you also have access to a bunch of other stuff. So the first step we need to do is very similar. We got to load that page. But then the second argument to this function here is talking about speech. So it's saying, while speech is optional, like consider passing what a screen reader user would rely on to know the page is loaded. So this has to do with 4.1.3 status messages and also just general user experience. And this is also a chance to capture the document's title. So we want to make sure NVDA loads the page and says that announcement. And then we want to do a scan of the page. So easy access to using Axe inside it. And after that, we want to start thinking about what we're interacting with. So I started tabbing, and the first thing I hit was a skip link. So I'm going to start declaring in accessible terms what I need to interact with that's in the dropdown. So we work with this in the concept of targets, and targets are very accessibility focused. They start by thinking about accessible name, which I think was skip to content. You must specify an accessible role, which in this case is a link. It doesn't have a value. And then things have visible labels, and in this case, it's the same thing. But that's an important aspect for like 2.5.3 label and name, voice control users. Generally, you want to establish this link between accessible names and what's actually visible on screen. And it would be a problem if they diverged, because then, for example, if this changed to just say jump to content, for example, now a voice control user wouldn't be able to invoke it because they would actually need to say skip to content. We need to interact with that skip link. We'll make it really easy to bring focus to it with the keyboard. This comes with a lot of defaults. It knows that tab is typically the way you interact. I'm also going to tell it like this should be the first link on the page. So just press tab once and it should be focused. And I believe I also need to tell it that you have to press tab and just trust it because skip links are invisible initially. And then the next thing we interact with is like the home page here. And I'm going to start pulling some code that I'd written beforehand to save time. So in sort of a very similar way here, we have our homepage link. In this case, it doesn't have a visible label, it has an icon. And we would actually want to fail the test if it started having text inside it, because that could potentially mean that its accessible name in the text diverged. But you want to focus that. And you also want to capture some extra information from a screen reader like NVDA. You want to make sure that NVDA is announcing the navigation landmark and it's announcing that the link is the current page. So let's stop there and just get this basic test up and running and see how it works. So just like before, it pops up in a browser, but it's a little confusing because there's a purple screen and then another screen where you are connected to a remote test environment. And this is the Assistiv Labs cloud. This is a remote machine that has a browser, has NVDA up and running on it. That serves
Assistiv Labs, Chromium. Assistiv Labs document.
Environment
Sleep mode on.
that you can automate. And this is exposing a funny responsive design bug there. But But right now it's just
Desktop
scanning the
list.
page with Axe, and
Recycle bin not
actually
selected.
it closed because it found some issues. And so it's saying, hey, we actually detected that there's a label content name mismatch, which is interesting because I ran the Axe browser extension and it didn't find any issues. Um, this is complaining that this chat button down here has the accessible name of, oops, I think it says help Scout Beacon open, but visibly it's chat. So in end-to-end testing, you have much more control over how you use Axe. You can enable experimental rules. You can enable kind of everything you need. So that's a way to get more out of tools like Axe. So that's interesting. And then it's also talking about things that it's not entirely sure an issue, but in this case, it's saying, hey, the YouTube player down on the page is a div that has an area label on it. And area label on div isn't really well supported because there's no role associated with it. So heads up on that. So you can get more power from your Axe scans this way. Um, and you can capture all that stuff. So I actually have some stuff ready to go here. So there's some code you can copy and kind of snapshot on the page of like, here's what I expect from the scan inside here. In this case, I'm going to capture two things. One is, yes, I know about the label content name mismatch on that Help Scout thing. I actually probably want to track this inside our issue tracker. So I would open a link inside an issue inside our GitHub. Then it's going to live inside this test and get revalidated every time the test is run, which is a cool aspect of accessibility because there's usually always issues hanging around. And then I'm also tracking the area label. In this case, I'm going to probably ignore that. YouTube has its own deal for better or worse, and we're just going to accept its faults. Um, so you can start tracking that kind of stuff in your scan. And let's run this test one more time. Things slowed down quite a bit so we can kind of observe more of what's going on.
Desktop list. About blank. Chromium. Assistiv Labs. Chromium. Assistiv Labs document. Sleep mode on. Sleep mode off. Banner landmark. Skip to content link.
So it's performing those interactions. NVIDIA is announcing
Desktop list.
this
Recycle bin not selected.
there. Probably had a typo inside it. Let's figure out what I did wrong. Oh, it's telling me that, hey, did you know that this is actually announcing as a banner landmark? And that's cool. I care about that. So you keep moving in this fashion, and you can create a large test of the page. And I'll jump to the pre-written example here, where let's clear this out a little bit. You're getting to the home link. You are getting to the use cases button, focusing that button. You're invoking it with keyboard. You're making sure that its expanded state's announced successfully. You do another scan because you want to check the page state once that drop down's open. Then you want to access the link inside the drop down with keyboard and the screen reader. And you want to make sure that after you invoke that link, you make it to the next page's H1 correctly, and then you want to run a scan on that page. So very briefly, we'll zoom through a video of that. All of that gets automated into a robotic run that's performing those same steps. So it's opening the dropdown, performing scans, getting to that final state, scanning again, and passing because it's able to perform all those steps and it didn't detect any issues. So what kinds of things can you find with this when you think of the difference it makes in terms of coverage. Like it's definitely good to know that that drop down works. It makes sense that this test proves you can get to it with keyboard. And it also proves a lot of things are announced by NVDA that you expect when the test is passed. But a couple examples of bugs it can find that tools like Axe can't are if you have a website that has the doomed outline none bug that a designer has added. So I'm pressing tab right now, and the skip link showed, but really I can't see visible focus because outlines have been hidden. Axe would pass on this page, but the automated test detects, hey, the element's focus state is invisible, and you can look at a report of that and see, hey, when we tried to focus the home page, its focused and unfocused states are exactly the same. So that's a failure. And you can work around that failure and get past it, but the test flags that for your review so you can open an issue. Another example here, let's say you have a focus management issue. So I can get to the dropdown, I can expand it with keyboard, but then when I press tab, focus doesn't go into the dropdown, it accidentally goes past it. This isn't something you would catch with mouse end-to-end testing. You would just click the link inside here and it would be fine. But again, you catch it because the test is saying, hey, I used keyboard, I pressed tab and expected to get to this link inside the dropdown, but instead I found my focus over on this other button. It's really powerful in that regard. And one final example here. In this case, it's saying, hey, when I got to this element and I pressed space to expand it, NVDA didn't say anything and actually didn't open on the page, but it's saying, I expected to hear expanded from the screen reader, but I got nothing. Instead, I got a re-announcement of the button that it was collapsed. So those are three examples of the types of issues you can find. There's far, far more from that. But to tie that back to kind of the larger picture of coverage.
New larger circle titled at 11YE2E almost completely filling up the main manual human testing circle, containing all of the previous circles inside of it.
We think that relatively significantly expands the amount of stuff that you can find with a test because unlike scanners like Axe, you're able to cover interactions. You're able to actually test screen reader compatibility. You're able to assess a lot of the visual things that aren't able to be assessed in a scanner context. And to put some numbers to this, for better or worse, I think it's important to try to quantify this stuff. It's also really tricky. But if you ask the question for WCAG 2.2, level A and level AA success criterion, SCs, there's 55 of them. And if you just ask the question of if a tool has a rule that pertains in any way to one of those success criterion, so touches it even very lightly. So for example, we would say Axe touches 2.1.1 keyboarding because it'll validate that you can tab to iframes, so you can scroll them with keyboard. That's a tiny, tiny fraction of your concerns for keyboarding, but we would count that. If you tally that up, Axe can do 40% of that 55 today. And end-to-end can do, with Axe standing on top of it, 80%. So you're doubling your coverage in a kind of different way, though. And by the way, this is including Axe's experimental rules. So like everything you could possibly kind of configure Axe to be able to do. But the important distinction there is when you're thinking of automatic tools like Axe, these are generally high breadth tools. Like they're looking at the whole page. They excel at that, top to bottom, your footer, everything. But they do tend to be relatively low depth depending on the area because they don't understand that context. They don't know how to open your drop downs in the global navigation. They don't know how to sign in or do anything, fill out forms. Whereas automated tests with end-to-end, they're built with automatic tools, so you retain high breadth, but the depth really varies. If we zoom in here, you have the same idea where you're getting full page coverage because you are doing those scans, but then that extra 40% of coverage is going to be limited to where you're heavily interacting with. So you're really positive that the global navigation is working well in this case because you're checking a whole bunch of aspects of it. You're less positive about the footer or other aspects of the page. Um, it's really up to you. The more end-to-end tests you write, the higher that depth of coverage goes. The less you write, the lower that depth of coverage goes. So kind of tying it back to those automation benefits from before, end-to-end is really interesting because it provides high coverage as compared to the existing tools that are commonly used today. It retains that ability to be fast and scalable, and it retains that ability to help you monitor with the caveat that it can do it better. When you have that higher coverage, you have a much clearer picture of your accessibility at any point in time. If you're just running Axe, you're just seeing a part of that picture. Imagine trusting that your website's accessible without validating any of the interactions to it. That sounds kind of scary. And it's really awesome at stopping backsliding and regressions. Again, it's high coverage. So the higher the coverage, the more regressions it can find, the more it can help you protect all the things that you put work into making accessible. Notice I didn't put cheap. That's the last thing inside here. This is more effort than Axe and like those automatic tools that are pretty straightforward to integrate. One line of code to get it in place in an end-to-end test suite, or one click to run a scan on a page. These are people who are skilled in accessibility, writing tests and building up this library of tests, and that takes effort, and that's definitely an order of magnitude greater than working with tools like Axe. But tying that back to some of what we do, like I think this technology, this approach can be generalized a good bit. Don't necessarily need our platform and framework to do it. But one way we try to support people with that is by helping them write those tests. So that's the idea that you work with our team like an auditor. And we do an audit, but we also build a test suite of that audit that integrates into your CI/CD. So you're getting this really cool kind of, we think of it as evergreen validation of an audit scope. So if you really care about your P0 features, if you really care about your checkout experience, that's the type of stuff you can create an end-to-end test suite over, and we help you do that and manage all the results from it. And so we kind of work with you in a white glove way on that, collaborating on an audit scope. But it's very different from the idea that like you're going to run Axe on every page possible on your website. Usually you create an end-to-end test suite around 25, 50 use cases. And you prioritize your highest traffic and highest risk cases. We have a case study out with Asana that I'd love if folks checked out, but they're really excited about how this kind of changed things, just the dramatic difference they felt from getting high coverage accessibility validation in CI/CD. And 10 minutes left. I will stop there for questions. Thank you all.
Nice. Good job. Yeah, great timing too. Plenty of time for questions if people have them. There was a question about focus visible, detecting that, and you covered it kind of right after the question was asked. Is there anything else that people are curious about? Like, what is this, or what's your reaction to it? What do you think? Have you seen anything like this before? Starting to get awkward. Okay, so
I can add in. So I mean, there's some existing tools that go beyond like the traditional end-to-end automation on the market. One is totally free, called GuidePub. And that's in the web accessibility Slack. It's bounced around in there a bunch, and it's really cool. It's a way that you can automatically drive NVDA or VoiceOver. I think those are the two main ones through code, which is kind of a similar idea. And encourage folks to kind of check that out and play with it. Our take on it is yes, and like you want that, and then you want a whole bunch of other stuff on top of that. You want the machine vision pieces, you want heavy keyboard validation, you want to treat keyboarding and screen readers as both concerns that you need to validate, and all that good stuff. So this is one of the cooler projects we've seen out in this space. Um, there's also been some cool blog posts that we can link to. I think Mark Stedman had some cool stuff around not having access to screen readers, not having access to machine vision, some of the stuff you can do in traditional end-to-end tests about asserting that, like, did the dialog open? Where is focus right now? Even if you are using click interactions, you can still check things like, is the right area attribute present?
Jen, did you have a question? Saw your hand up there for a second.
Sorry, I was struggling with my mic there.
No worries.
It was really just a comment. I I really enjoyed seeing your framing of the end-to-end. To your earlier point, so often I see people and teams stopping with acts and not understanding that there are more nuanced interactions to be assessed. So to see something that doesn't feel so daunting is great to see. So thank you so much for sharing this.
I've seen that effect in a number of places where teams will set up acts, and
Mhm.
some of the results are really self-explanatory, like missing alt text, and people fix them. But sometimes acts will generate results that are confusing to people who don't have accessibility expertise. And acts doesn't frame its results really in a usability context. Again, because it doesn't understand your page. It'll say that error about the YouTube player. It'll say, hey, you've got a div here with an area label. What does that actually mean? Like, what does that mean to a screen reader user? Like, does that mean that someone using NVDA like can't interact with the YouTube player? So teams will struggle with that and like kind of have one or two actions. You can put a bunch of effort into just trying to quiet acts down and like I'll appease you, or you can end up ignoring it and just saying, well, I don't understand this, so I'm just gonna leave acts on in the background, and that doesn't it kind of turns into a source of noise, which is a rough state to end up in.
Definitely. Lots of friction and just so much interpretation needing to be had, especially without having access to people who rely on these forms of assistive technology. So lots of gratitude here.
That's something that Asana case study. That's one thing we really enjoy doing in our Evergreen audit service is we act as a human in the loop for that stuff. So when Axe does generate failures, we don't pass that on to teams. We write up a professional issue with that explains it in very like beginner-friendly terms, which is useful for Axe, really useful for all the stuff that Axe can't cover too, of focus management, changes in screen reader announcements. Is it a problem that Axe no longer announces banner landmark? Depends, right? There could be a lot of reasons.
Cool. Anything else? All right. This has been great. Thanks. I mean, great job, Weston. Great job, Nick. And thank you all for being here and for your participation. And yeah, like I said, I'll be posting video, the recording of this soon, and we'll get audio descriptions added to that as well. But yeah, if this has kind of piqued your interest and you want to learn more, you want to dive deeper with us, get in touch. We're happy to get on a call and kind of walk you through even more details about it. But yeah, thanks so much for being here. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.